Okay, good afternoon. This is Steve Mazzacane podcast. Welcome to the show. We will get going in just a few minutes. A lot of news coming in today, and I'm flipping through a lot of stuff. But I spent the last 45 minutes or so reading over testimony from the January 6th hearing. Wow, that's the only thing to say about that today. I'm watching updates come in. It's just last year on January 6th, when the attack was happening, when the attack on the Capitol was taking place, we came on live and we had Sean Scanlon here talking about it. And it was just a level of this can't be real kind of stuff. Like, we can't be watching people attack the Capitol. And today we have, in my opinion, I've watched some of these. I've watched some of the highlights. I've not watched every minute of it. I know some people are addicted to it, but did read the daily updates and what's happening. And there is simply no way I can answer for what we saw today. It's spectacular. And today what you saw was an aide to Mark Meadows, who was the chief of staff under Trump, on January 6th, on this day, give firsthand accounts of the way people were acting, the way the president was acting, the way Mark Meadows was acting, warnings given by legal sources. And what you end up seeing is that there was extensive previous understanding that January 6th could end up just like this. This was not a surprise. It was known. They were warned. They knew. Mark Meadows knew January 6th could be, for lack of a better word, a shit show. Attorneys knew that there were serious crimes that could be charged based on what could happen January 6th. This is not after the fact. This is prior to the fact. And the testimony today is just spectacular. So we'll get to that. We'll read some of the key points that came out today. I don't have any significant insight except for just to talk about it, and we'll do that today. Also, Miss Maxwell, we just saw this about 45 minutes ago. Ghislaine Maxwell, the person who helped Jeffrey Epstein basically kidnap and traffic countless girls for sex, illegal sex, charged with sex trafficking, conspiracy, and enticing a minor to travel across state lines, got 20 years. So the prosecutors were looking for 35. Her attorneys were looking for 5 years. The judge gave 20. She's 60 years old. So that might be the last she sees the light of day. But so hopefully that's the end of it. I wonder did she get a longer sentence because he was no longer around? He committed suicide or didn't kill, whatever we believe. I'm not so sure. But in any event, an interesting thing. Before we get to that hard news, I do want to talk about some positive stuff. Over the last weekend, I went to see Chicago. And, the play Chicago at Branford High School. And the only reason I'm telling you this is because so often when we hear about a play that's going to be at a high school, we're like, oh, it's a high school play. Like, it's not. I've covered many Board of Education meetings where the Board of Ed members are either Branford, Madison, Guilford, whatever town I've been to. It's like, these plays are Broadway worthy. I'm like, I've been to Broadway plays. They're not Broadway worthy. Like, they're good, they're fine, but they're not that level. Let's be honest. But that's fine. You can think what you want. But this is the Shoreline. Colin Sheehan has it, and it's not high school kids necessarily. Some are high school kids, but in general, it's older. It's adults. A wide range of people in it. And Chicago is an adult-oriented show anyway. I will tell you this. I went to see Pretty Woman at the Bushnell about 2-3 months ago. This had better production values and better acting here in Branford, played at Branford High School, than that play did at the Bushnell. This was spectacular. And if you've ever seen Chicago, there's a ton of dancing, a lot of singing, just spectacular performances. And one of the actors, and I'm sorry, I'm friends with him on Facebook. I just don't remember what his name is, who played a lead character, not Flynn, the other guy, the husband, is a Branford kid who was spectacular. I say kid, but he's older now, was spectacular. And he's directing another play that'll be at Walsh Intermediate School with adults as well. The spelling bee play. I'll give you the name of it in a second. 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. He's directing that. I will post this on our page at some point. I'm going to make sure I go see this for a few reasons. One, the quality of the shows put out is spectacular, and two, it's at the France Walsh's Intermediate School auditorium. It's a brand new auditorium. If you look at our Brantford 7 Facebook page, the head picture is the auditorium. It's beautiful. It's stunning. So I'm going to take advantage of go see that. That's happening July 8th, I guess, that weekend. If you get a second, go see it. I highly recommend what Colin and his fellow directors and owner of Shoreline Theater Company are doing. It's really, really quite impressive. Okay, so let's get Chris Lemieux. Thank you, Colin. Happy Tuesday. Love the Hawaiian shirt. Yeah, I'm going for it. Like I just said, it's hot out. You know, might as well wear something new. I bought this for a cruise I was on a few months ago, and it's comfortable, so I wear it. So in any event, I'm going to go see that play, and I suggest we'll post it as well to get that out there. And the only reason I say that is so often, and I've done this, it's like it's a high school play. You think it's just high school kids, and there's nothing wrong with high school kids, granted. But this is not. This is adults from all over the shoreline getting together and acting in a play. And these are people who are passionate about it. Very good performances. Okay, so let's talk about, and there's not, Politico, I think, had a really good article that lays out what happened today. And I'm going to pull it up if I can grab it. So here is what happened. Her name is Cassidy Hutchinson, and she was the assistant. There was a surprise hearing today. There was not supposed to be a hearing of this committee. This committee is a bipartisan committee looking into the events of last January 6th, the day that a rally took place. President Trump spoke at this rally, and after he left, it became this attack on the Capitol. They had basically a desire to hang Mike Pence because Mike Pence would not work to try to negate the outcome of the election. Trump consistently stated that the election was stolen, it was wrong, the results were wrong, all this other stuff. There was no evidence to support that. They were not able to provide evidence to support that. They asked, Trump clearly was asking Pence to do something as he has to certify the electors. And Pence, as much as Pence stands for some crazy things and backwards, incredibly religious things I may not agree with, did the right thing here and said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not playing that game. And so, literally in the testimony today was that Mark Meadows told his assistant that when warned that they're talking about literally killing Mike Pence and hanging Mike Pence, Trump's response was he deserves it. I don't know how anybody, if you're a Democrat and you're cheering this, so be it, but you should be sad. Like this is not supposed to happen here. If you're a Republican and you supported Trump, you have to wonder, what the hell were you supporting? Like, I understand that there are people who say, and in some cases I can understand it. Well, I didn't like the mean tweets, but we had less gas prices then, or we had other things. Now, Biden's done a lot of the same things Trump had in place. Biden has continued the same policy on China, a lot of the same policy on trade, a lot of the same policy on Afghanistan. A lot of stuff Trump did wasn't nearly as bad as Democrats were saying. That said, he was a little crazy. And he would do crazy things and say crazy things that had massive impact on people and people's lives. But to say your vice president deserves to have his life threatened because he would not go along with what the evidence supported, that someone else won the election. Trump didn't win the election. It's amazing. That's an amazing thing happening. I'm dumbfounded. I was shocked that day on this camera talking with Sean Scanlon, talking about what the hell are we looking at? And today we have this testimony from someone who was in the room. He's on camera going in the room with Mark Meadows, Steve Mnuchin. This was an insider, someone who was there, who no question Trump knew, had access to him, very close to Mark Meadows. This is not some fly-by-night person. This isn't somebody who overheard somebody or who overheard somebody who overheard somebody. And remember that as we read this, some of these updates. Meadows said that Trump thought Pence deserved chance, calling for him to be hanged. Hutchins said she heard Meadows say that Trump did not think the January 6th Capitol rioters were doing anything wrong, and that Vice President Mike Pence deserved to face chance that called for his hanging. People died in this, by the way. People died this day. To imply that nothing was wrong, breaking into the Capitol illegally, is just crazy. Trump shattered his lunch plate after hearing Barr said election wasn't fraudulent, aide said he was told. So attorneys, who were attorneys rooting for Trump, people on his own team, told him, no, this was not an illegal election. It was not a stolen election. Hutchins described Trump's angry reaction with former Attorney General Bill Barr when in an interview with the Associated Press after saying there was no election fraud. This is her testimony. I left the office and went down to the dining room, and I noticed that the door was propped open and the valet was inside the dining room, changing the tablecloth off the dining room table. He motioned for me to come in, then pointed towards the front of the room near the fireplace mantel and the TV, where I first noticed there was ketchup dripping down the wall and there was a shattered porcelain plate on the floor. Hutchinson said that the valet told her Trump was extremely angry at Barr and had thrown his lunch against the wall, which was causing them to have it cleaned up. You have the actions of a child. Now, I understand that presidents are under a spectacular level of scrutiny and spectacular level of pressure that's on them. But come on, you're a child. And I love this comment, Steve. Nobody cares about January 6th. The whole country cares about January 6th. The entire country cares about January 6th. You know who really should care about it? Republicans. Let me make that clear. This is not a question. No matter what party someone is, when you have an attack on the Capitol, then you have testimony from people, by the way, who were on Trump's team. This isn't a Democrat who was in there, period. It's on every channel now. The whole country cares about this. Who was on his team, who was in the room with Mark Meadows, telling you that Trump threw things, thought it was okay to call for Mike Pence's murder. And then we go into this. Hutchinson testified that she was told that Trump became irate when informed by security that he would not be going to the Capitol because the situation was not secure. So Secret Service determined we're not going to the Capitol. Bad things are happening. Their first and foremost job is to keep the president safe. He repeatedly told Trump on the way back to the White House that Trump's speech that it wasn't safe to go to the Capitol, and she testified that she heard a secondhand account, now granted secondhand account, of how Trump was so enraged at a Secret Service detail for blocking him from going to the Capitol that he lunged to the front of his presidential limo and tried to turn the wheel. According to Hutchinson, Ornato recounted Trump screaming, "I'm the effing president, take me to the Capitol now." Trump then reached up toward the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel, and then use his other hand to lunge at Engel, who was a Secret Service expert. Mark Meadows looked for a presidential pardon. When warned that many of the people at this rally had weapons, this is what Hutchinson testified she overheard Trump saying that he did not care if his supporters had weapons and suggested he had no issue with them marching on the Capitol armed. I overheard the president say something to the effect of, "I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here. Let the people in. Take the effing mags away." This is the president of the United States. Ignore political party. This is the president of the United States and a strong supporter of the president of the United States, giving you testimony on what happened. Throwing a hissy fit in the dining room when he was told he had no legal legs to stand on. Saying it was fine that his supporters had weapons and let them keep going with weapons. Now, it's one thing to say, hey, they're not after me. But that is the single most arrogant thing on the planet, because you had no problem with them being after Pence. You thought it was appropriate that they called for Pence's head. They literally called for Pence's murder, and you thought it was no big deal that they had weapons on them. How stupid are you? How stupid is this individual? And he's the president of the United States. It's just absolutely crazy. There's a quote in here. Meadows told Hutchinson, this is now before the attack, this is on January 2nd, 4 days before this attack, Meadows, the chief of staff, tells his assistant, former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows told his aide Cassidy Hutchinson that things might get real bad on January 6th. She said he told her this after he spoke with former Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani, who told her something to the effect of, "We're going to the Capitol." Hutchinson said that Meadows was scrolling through his phone. I remember leaning against the doorway and saying, "I just had an interesting conversation with Rudy. It sounds like we're going to the Capitol." He didn't look up from his phone, and he said something to the effect of, "There's a lot going on, Cass, but I don't know. Things might get real bad on January 6th. That evening was the first moment I can remember feeling scared and nervous for what was about to happen on January 6th. There are people at the highest level of government, 4 days in advance, had all the warning you could possibly have that this was going to get ugly. You had a president who was okay with calling for the head of Mike Pence, and he was okay with his people and supporters having weapons going to the Capitol. Now, this is an investigation on the legislative side of our government. The judicial side has yet to get involved. I find it very hard to believe the judicial side doesn't get involved very quickly. And it is spectacular that this is, it's kind of dumbfounding that you had Mark Meadows 4 days before, fully aware that this could become an absolute shit show, real bad, 4 days in advance, and did nothing to stop it. Nothing. And, Steve, you're posting, how about the 50 people that died at the border yesterday? Yes, that's an awful thing. That's terrible. 50 people that were left in a trailer, deserted on the side of the road in Texas in the heat and died. And not everyone in the trailer died, but 50 people passed away. That's fine. We can talk about things in different contexts. I don't know why anybody who's an American doesn't want to know what their president was doing while this happened. And anybody who thinks what happened on January 6th is okay is just nuts. By any standard, is just nuts. The attorney, I got to pull this up. Hutchinson said that the conduct was unpatriotic, but I got to find, there was an article where the attorney basically said, don't go to the Capitol because we're going to be charged with every crime known to man. The key point of all of this, and I don't subscribe to the, I'm not here to just bash Trump because I have defended Trump at times. I'm not a supporter, didn't vote for him, but I've defended him because at times the attacks were just ridiculous. Some of his stances on things actually made sense. On economics actually made sense. I don't know that he had actual plans to do anything, but some of his initial stances made sense. The trade war, I understood. It made sense. How he treated Afghanistan kind of made sense, and that's why Biden ended up doing the same thing. It didn't, not to pretend for a second, it didn't hurt a lot of people. We're going crazy about this abortion ruling. Pulling out of Afghanistan drastically changed the lives and rights of a whole country full of women who no longer can leave their house without a man. So let's not pretend for a second there aren't huge civil rights issues going on with that decision made by Biden and previously by Trump. That said, this is pretty shocking. No, not a surprise that it was a surprise testimony given. But when you have Mark Meadows, attorneys, Giuliani, all these incredibly high-ranking people who at some point in their careers were admired people. Giuliani was incredibly admired after 9/11 and the way he handled it and got the town of New York City through that. All these other people with political careers were greatly admired throughout their careers. In their position of great power, they have all the warnings in the world that something awful can happen. Something awful happens that takes lives. At some point, you have to ask yourself, if you're thinking back in history and you supported these people, if you know now, or knew then what you know now, would you have supported them? I hope the answer is no. At some point, you just have to say, man, I was wrong. I was wrong to be near this guy. I was wrong to vote for him. You may not have liked Hillary, but you're wrong to vote for somebody capable of this. Lunging at a Secret Service agent to go a certain direction. Throwing plates at staff or in a dining room. Clearly having no issues with weapons, have no issues with his vice president's life being threatened. This is crazy. And this very likely ends up, in my opinion, with Trump behind bars. I don't see how it ends up any other way. I don't see how anybody, any jury, or any judicial system won't see that this guy incited a riot and worked to support that riot moving forward at the end of the day. And it's just mind-blowing to me. Now, Steve, as you're posting, that's not saying that there's not other stories. There's other stories. 50 people died. Yes, we talked about what happened in Ukraine yesterday. We have not talked yet about school shootings that have happened in the last few weeks. And we'll talk about those in the next couple of podcasts, depending on what more news comes out. But this is one that, whether you believe it or not, every American cares about. When word gets out, the average lay people, that he had no problem with his vice president's life being threatened, that he had no problem with his supporters being armed, that's not good. That's not good. From a political standpoint, it's been an amazing couple weeks for Democrats because they now have everything to run in the next election. They can go after Trump mercilessly, and they're going to go after social issues like crazy. Republicans, bad week. Really bad week. And if you're a Republican in a state like Connecticut or a northern state where most Republicans lean more moderate anyway, you give away the biggest issue. Abortion is going to just destroy you in most of these elections. And Trump's horrific performance on January 6th and leading up to it, and even afterwards, it went 2.5 hours, 3 hours before he even said, "Hey guys, stop." And remember, people died. People died that day because of the actions or the inaction of Mark Meadows, Rudy Giuliani, other people in Trump circles. And they died directly because of the action and encouragement of President Trump. Doesn't matter what party you are. All of the evidence is supporting that statement. And it's embarrassing. The rest of the world is looking at this saying, your president of the United States did this. And Watergate was bad, but far, far worse in my mind. Far, far worse. Your own vice president, indifferent to his own life because he wouldn't do something that was completely absurd. And to this day, there's still no evidence that this election was wrong or stolen. Most Republicans had a very simple viewpoint. I'm fighting for Trump. I want Trump to win. But after a couple days, when the election results came out, okay, we lost. We move on. That's what happens. That's what elections are. That's what the peaceful transfer of power is. That before January 6th was the hallmark of America. It was the thing that separated America from so many other countries, where it's not peaceful, where there's coups and there's battles and there's wars and there's bloodshed to change power. America didn't do that. People went to a polling place, they put their vote in, and whoever lost accepted losing. And I grew up watching the losing candidate give a speech of how we have to come together as a nation and get behind the winner. We even had one who may have won in a hanging Chad election in Florida concede early to keep the peace and keep America together. And then we have this person who is being told repeatedly by people in his inner circle, you have no legal legs to stand on. There is no way to change this. You did not lose the election. It was not stolen. You lost the election. It was not stolen from you, yet continued to incite with false information, lies. And even when people in his own cabinet, in his own party were being threatened, their lives were being threatened, kept going. Knew Pence's life was being threatened, but had no problem with those people had weapons. I don't know how anybody justifies that. Of any party. And when you have people in his inner circle saying this is nuts, this is crazy, what do you do? As a logical human being, how do you respond to that and say, yeah, no, it makes sense? Actually, how do you respond to that and say, let's talk about something else? How's that possible? And Mark Meadows to date has not testified which he opens himself up for legal actions. But after this, after his assistant testified, it makes an awful lot of sense for him to get in there now before the Justice Department starts their investigation, which is very likely to come. Okay, I want to get back and watch more of this because it's amazing testimony. And I know there's always a sense, hey, life is happening. This is history. We should be watching politics and being on top of it. There are moments in every whatever, couple years, whatever. January 6th was that moment. Like, holy God, I can't believe I'm witnessing this. In this whole hearing, in this whole testimony today, June 28th, is that moment in this hearing where you had the closest person to Trump testifying, who was there that day, with Meadows that day, had access to the president, knew what was going on that day, actually give testimony like this is spectacular. And so, yes, the whole country is paying attention to what's happening in Washington now. All right, we'll wrap it up for now. I'm going to get back to this, and there's going to likely be a lot more coming out on this. So there's more tomorrow. We'll talk about it. We will talk about school shootings as well. I don't always want to talk about negative stuff, but we will get to that tomorrow. And a few people sent in questions on Branford-related development. I will try tomorrow to get to that. People still ask about Costco. From what I have been told, at some point it's coming. There's some other developments that are being talked about in Exit 56 area. We'll talk about those tomorrow, and I have a list of some of those things. So if there's some questions, if you have questions or issues or comments that you want to send in, please do, and I'll read them to the best that I can. Guys, it's an amazing day outside. I'm going to get out and play some tennis. I hope you get out as well. Enjoy your evening, and I will see you tomorrow.